Worsening security in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo will guarantee spread of Ebola. An estimated 20,000 Nigerian refugees return from Cameroon. And Somalia forces end al-Shabaab siege that lasted a day in Mogadishu. Hello and welcome to CGTN. This is Africa Live and I'm Karen Roberts in Nairobi. Also coming up in the programme. Wildlife rangers, soldiers and teams of volunteers continue fighting a raging fire on Mount Kenya. And in sport, South Africa's Olympic champion Wade van Niekerk outlines his plans for the 2019 season. Let's start in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where 3 people contaminated with the deadly Ebola virus have returned to a clinic for treatment. They fled during attacks in the eastern part of the country. Facilities belonging to medical NGO Médecins Sans Frontières were burned down in the towns of Katwa and Butembo. The NGO has since suspended its work in the area. The World Health Organization has condemned the attacks and warned that such action can only guarantee a spread of the virus.
In the light of the recent attacks, an enhanced discussion with MONUSCO forces, with local authorities, to see how this can best be done so that the safety of the patients and of course of the staff is ensured, and that everything can be done to get this outbreak under control. But as I mentioned earlier, the deteriorating security situation bears the likelihood of an increase of Ebola cases. That is definitely a given. And it's a very understandable reaction that under fire you try to save your own life more than anything. So 3 have already voluntarily returned. That's also important to note. They understand how important it is. And the 4th, for whatever reason, hasn't come back yet or hasn't been traced yet. That's why efforts have to be high to find that patient and to find the contacts of the other 3 and of that 4th patient.
Still in the DRC, President Felix Tshisekedi has pledged to pardon political prisoners. He says that he'll work to return those who had fled abroad for political reasons. Tshisekedi outlined his major goals for his first 100 days in office. He pledged to turn around the judicial system by appointing honest people. The DRC leader also has plans to fight corruption in the Central African country.
Within 10 days, I will take a measure of granting a presidential pardon to political prisoners who have been sentenced by decisions that have been overturned. I will ensure that justice is administered by honest people with the irreproachable moral values and who will be willing to fight the corruption that tarnishes the image of a true rule of law.
In Nigeria, an estimated 20,000 refugees have reportedly returned to the northeastern town of Ran from Cameroon. UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric told reporters in New York that the refugees had fled deadly attacks by non-state armed groups in December last year. Dujarric noted that the returnees are in dire need of humanitarian assistance due to ongoing insecurity in Nigeria. More refugees are expected to return to Ran later this weekend.
Reports indicate that returnees are in dire need of humanitarian assistance. International and national humanitarian organizations have not returned to Ran since January 17th due to ongoing insecurity. An estimated 5,000 Nigerian refugees remain in Gora in Cameroon.
While staying in the country, Nigeria's Electoral Commission has asked its officials to file comprehensive reports after some of them were threatened, kidnapped and raped while conducting elections last week. The Commission says the report will help its polling officials in the upcoming governorship elections. CGTN's Kelechi Emeklem reports.
Most of the polling officials are university graduates who are currently undergoing a mandatory national youth service. They were employed on casual basis. Earlier reports had indicated one was killed, others were harassed, beaten and even kidnapped. But claims of rape is just emerging. The Commission's chairman has now ordered for a detailed report to ascertain the scale of attacks. The Commission is also assessing the effectiveness of security deployed during the elections. Nigerians will return to the polls March 9 to vote for governors and state legislators. The Commission wants to ensure violence is not repeated. Dozens were killed in last week's disputed elections. President Muhammadu Buhari retained his seat. The main opposition candidate, Atiku Abubakar, has rejected the results. His lawyers are compiling evidence to challenge the results in court. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Algerian President Abdelaziz Bouteflika is expected to submit his candidacy documents for the April the 18th election on Sunday, the final day for registration. Well, earlier there were reports that the president had sought treatment at a Geneva hospital for an undisclosed illness. He turned 82 this Saturday. Well, for a week now, the country has witnessed widespread protests against his re-election. While they've mostly been peaceful, scuffles broke out between police and protesters on Friday, leaving one person dead and several injured. The incumbent president is seeking a fifth term, having been in office since 1999. To Somalia now, and the death toll from a deadly attack in Mogadishu now stands at 30. Police say security has been improved across the capital as the militant group al-Shabaab has warned of more attacks in the coming days. CGTN's Abdulaziz Billo now reports from Mogadishu.
It's the deadliest attack to rock Mogadishu so far this year. On Thursday, a suicide bomber rammed an explosive-laden vehicle into this downtown hotel and nearby buildings before armed fighters stormed the facility, laying a siege that lasted for almost 24 hours. Hotels and nearby business centers were completely destroyed. Al-Shabaab says its main target was the Makkah Al-Mukarramah hotel, mostly frequented by senior government officials. On Friday evening, the government formally announced it had ended the siege after security forces rescued more than 30 hostages and killed 4 armed attackers holed up in the buildings. Police also recovered more bodies from nearby buildings that collapsed during the attack.
Digfa Hospital received 55 victims, most of them with serious injuries. Medina Hospital received 33 cases, including 4 serious ones. Some have been discharged. More than 80 people were injured in this attack, and we will work hard to ensure they receive proper health care.
Outside the scene of the attack, business owners have returned to count their losses. Nearby, twisted vehicles and rickshaws destroyed in the attacks remain on the main road in the capital. After this latest attack, many here in the capital will be demanding answers from authorities as to just how the militant group was able to stage such a complex attack in the heart of the capital, despite increased security presence along major roads of the capital.
The recent assault was an attack on civilians in Somalia, and there's only one option for all of us: defeating the enemy of peace. We are now in the process of strengthening our armed forces, equipping them and providing them with logistical support. I assure you all that we will defeat al-Shabaab.
Insecurity has remained a big challenge for President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo's administration that vowed to end al-Shabaab's insurgency within 2 years. A series of air attacks against the group by US military has claimed hundreds of its fighters outside Mogadishu. But the group continues to carry out regular attacks in the capital against government officials and security personnel. Last week, government forces retook control of this military base in the capital that served as an African Union post for the first time in 11 years, as AMISOM plans to hand over security responsibilities to local forces before it winds down its decade-long mission in the country. Abdulaziz Billo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
An international appeal for aid for drought-stricken Zimbabwe has already raised over $25 million. 2 days ago, the United Nations began mobilizing support for an estimated 5.3 million people facing food shortages in the southern African nation. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya with the details.
Erratic rainfall has severely affected production of food crops, in particular the staple maize, whose output is expected to plummet from 1.7 million tons in 2018 to under 1 million this year. Annual consumption is about 1.8 million tons. The deficit will leave at least 5 million people, about a third of the country's population food insecure. The United Nations has received a positive response from donors for its $234 million appeal.
We are seeing interest, we are seeing concern, and we recognize that these interests and concerns would translate to resources because they fully are aware of the sufferings of the Zimbabweans.
The funds will cover various needs, but the bulk will go towards food.
And we recognize that the most efficient, effective mode of assistance would be through cash transfers. In other words, every household would have a cash entitlement that is equivalent to their daily food needs. So, with the 130 million, that is supposed to cover 2.2 million chronically severe food insecure households.
Ongoing economic challenges are compounding the latest drought.
If you recall 2 years ago when we had the worst El Nino-induced drought, even though there were about 4.1 million people who were affected, their recovery pace was very fast. They were able to rebound from that shock because the economy was running well, so to speak. Now, even when we do provide some form of assistance in the form of cash, they have to contend with the volatility on commodity prices or even the scarcity of commodities.
The just launched emergency appeal will keep vulnerable communities fed during this lean season up to June. However, given the devastating impact of climate change, development agencies aren't sure what the next agricultural season will deliver. The World Food Programme says it's working on food security projections for the next 24 months to make sure that they are ready to assist a country that is increasingly prone to climate-induced humanitarian challenges. Farai Makutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
We are going to a short break now. Don't go away. Lots more to come, including wildlife rangers, soldiers and teams of volunteers continue to fight a raging fire on Mount Kenya. And Ethiopia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs cautions against use of unofficial channels to secure study opportunities in China.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Egypt, train doors have reopened to fewer passengers than normal at Cairo's central train station. This follows an accident where 22 people died and dozens were injured on Wednesday. Egypt's Transport Minister Hisham Arafat has since resigned from office. The country's public prosecutor has ordered the detention of 6 people for 4 days in connection with the incident. The train's driver, his assistant, another train driver and 3 other rail employees will be held for 4 days for investigation. CGTN's Adel El Bahrouhi reports now that train accidents have been common in Egypt, with at least 1 deadly incident every year since 2008.
Egypt has the second oldest railroad network in the world. 4,300 railway crossings stretch across the country. Most of them are operated manually. At least 1,000 accidents that involve trains have been taking place every year since 2008. 12 deadly accidents took place in the last decade, including Wednesday's locomotive crash.
The Egyptian railroad is a graveyard for transportation ministers. A minister for transportation does not have first-hand responsibility in that accident. Their resignations are usually political. This week's accident is no different from the previous railroad accidents. Most of them have happened due to human errors, poor maintenance, and lack of trained labor.
The government estimates that full renovation of the Egyptian railway service could cost up to $14 billion. State budget deficit, however, usually stand in the way. Last transportation minister needed some $600 million for urgent maintenance in 2018. The government allocated less than half of that sum.
More accidents will happen. We've seen accidents in the most advanced nations who have better human caliber and technologies. Egypt has not developed its employees or even infrastructure. Employees are very poor, have little salaries and social status. The same people will be operating the current or new machineries.
Wednesday's accident has exposed the decomposing infrastructure. After a crash between two locomotives, the conductor from one went to fight with the other driver, leaving his machine running. The locomotive slipped away and created a deadly blaze, which people tried to put out with buckets of water instead of water hose.
The state must realize that it is not a bad idea to resolve the current mismanagement and poor maintenance by inviting the private sector. We must bring in investors to turn this massive railroad infrastructure into a profitable business. That will give our citizens a safe and developed means of transport and will not put any financial burden onto the government.
Egypt was the second country in the world to introduce railroads to its people. But what should have been a source of pride for the nation has been a death trap for many citizens. In 2018, the parliament has been working on a law that would allow the private sector to invest and restore the infrastructure of railroads. However, that law has never been implemented. Adil Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
To Kenya now, and teams are still trying to contain a fierce forest fire that's been raging in Mount Kenya National Park for close to a week now. The government body in charge of national parks, the Kenya Wildlife Service, says it's made good progress but is appealing for help. More than 80,000 hectares around the wider Mount Kenya region have been destroyed. Wildlife rangers, soldiers and teams of volunteers are trying to stop the blaze. Mount Kenya is Africa's second highest peak and home to many kinds of animals.
This time in the year we are combating some of the worst fires on Mount Kenya and as well as Aberdare, together with our partner Kenya Forest Service and also some other stakeholders. The fire has not interfered with the tourism activities, especially the people hiking up on the mountain or visiting the various tourist activities in the park, except the first day when it started, when some people going down the Chogoria route had actually to wait for some time so that the smoke can clear.
Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has visited Ethiopia as the two countries seek to strengthen existing ties. Kenyatta began his two-day visit early on Friday. The Kenyan president and his host, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, presided over the opening of a Kenya-Ethiopia Trade Forum. The event is seen as a platform to boost trade relations. Both leaders are spearheading economic reforms in their respective countries. Very much.
Kenya and Ethiopia have and continue to enjoy strong socio-economic and political identity rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and deep sense of solidarity. I wish to seize the opportunity on this extraordinary occasion of our gathering today to draw your attention to our ties that hold us together as East African brothers and sisters.
Two nations have enjoyed a historical bond that has been a strong foundation of our strategic partnership. Today's mission, therefore, offers us a unique opportunity to chart a path for our common prosperity through robust economic and trade relations. I believe this mission is timely, happening at a time when, under your leadership, Prime Minister, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia is undergoing fundamental political and economic transformation. And please, on my own behalf and on behalf of the people of Kenya, accept my profound congratulations for your visionary leadership.
The Ethiopian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is urging its people to use official channels while securing opportunities to study in China. Ethiopia is the biggest beneficiary of cooperation under the Global China Aid Framework. Well, over the past year, China has trained more than 5,000 Ethiopians in various fields. Every year, more than 400 Ethiopian students travel to China for further studies. But some brokers are using this to exploit students.
China and Ethiopia share strong economic, political and social ties. Many Ethiopian students have benefited from Chinese scholarships. We want to discourage students who are trying to go to China from using illegal ways or illegal scholarship brokers. Neither the government of China nor Ethiopia are responsible for citizens and students who are using these illegal channels. Consuming khat and drugs is also a crime in China.
We've got all the sports news coming up after the break, including